Okay, what I want to answer in this little video is what does sine 50 degrees even mean? So if you've done trigonometry in year one, but I'm sure that there's some of you out there who are still wondering, what does it even mean? What is sine? What is tan? What's cos? What are these things and what do they mean? And what's sine of 50 degrees or tan of 30 degrees or cos of 70 degrees? What do these things even mean? Right, so today I wanted to show you what it was all about. This is really what trigonometry is. It's about lengths in triangles and it's about ratios between sides of triangles. So I've got a triangle here and you'll see it's a right angle triangle. And in my right angle triangle here, you'll notice, well, I've constructed this triangle so that this angle here, angle CAB, is 50 degrees. Now note that the size of this, I've made this triangle a certain size with that angle being 50 degrees. But the way I've constructed it, you can see if I drag this, it changes the size of the triangle. It's still a right angle triangle and this angle down here doesn't change, it's still 50 degrees. But what is changing is the length of this side, BC, and the length of this side, AB. But no matter how I change these sides, that angle down here is still 50 degrees. Now, what I want to do is measure two sides. I'm going to measure this side, BC. So measure length. There it is. CB is, I'm making it a bit bigger, 4.41 centimetres. As I drag that, you'll see it changes, just depending on how I drag this triangle out. And I'm going to do the same thing for this side, the hypotenuse, AC. Measure length. Okay, so 6.14, and you'll see as I change this, those measurements change. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take that measurement there, and I'm going to divide it by that measurement there. Now that's called a ratio. A ratio is just a division. It's one thing divided by another thing of the same quantity. So this thing here, this length is in centimetres, and this length is in centimetres. And when I divide one by the other, I get a ratio. It's just a number, okay? One number divided by another number. But you'll see these things change as I change the size of the triangle. So you would expect that when I divide that thing by that thing, I'd get a different answer, depending on how big my triangle was. Well, mathematicians did this ages ago. They constructed these triangles with a fixed angle down here, and this is what they found. So let's try that. I'm going to divide that by that. All right, so in this little program, I select that, I go calculate. Right, I'm going to go this length divided by this length. And I get an answer of about 0.77. Okay, so let's see what happens now as I change this length, these two lengths. As I change them, you'll see the lengths change. What's happening with the division? One divided by the other, it's not changing. It's not that I fixed this. This is a calculation. It's taking these measurements and dividing one by the other, and it's getting the same answer every time, 0.77. Well, that's rounded to two decimal places, but it's not changing. No matter what we do, it's not changing, okay? It stays the same. Now, let me just compare that with another calculation. I'm going to go calculate, and I'm going to go sine of 50 degrees. And what do you know? We get the same answer, 0.77. Now, that's what we've actually calculated by measuring these two sides and dividing one by the other. We've measured sine of 50 degrees. The 50 degrees, where does that come from? Well, that's the angle that we set down here to be 50 degrees. What we did was we divided this side, which we're going to call the opposite side, it's opposite to the angle in question, which is this one. So we call it the opposite side. This side, of course, the longer side of a triangle is called the hypotenuse. And what we did was we divided the opposite side by the hypotenuse. When we do that in a right angle triangle, the number that we get by dividing one length by the other is known as the sine ratio. And we'll get lots of different sine ratios depending on this angle here. Obviously, if I did this with a different angle, we'd get a different answer. But the key thing is here that sine of 50 degrees, 0.77, is always the same. And so it doesn't matter how big my triangle is or how small my triangle is, what these two measurements are. If I divide that one, if I divide the opposite side by the hypotenuse, if that angle there is 50 degrees, I'm always going to get the same answer, and that's 0.77. Now, some kind soul constructed a calculator which does that for us, and we've got in our calculator the sine measurements for all the angles. All right, so if I want to work out, well, say I want to change that angle to, I don't know, 30 degrees. What would happen then if I divided my opposite by my hypotenuse? What answer would I get then? I'd get a different answer. I wouldn't get 0.77. But the interesting thing is it wouldn't matter how big that triangle was. If that angle was 30 degrees, I'd always be getting the same answer. Okay? So that is what sine 50 degrees means. It means it's just a number. Sine 50 degrees is just a number. It's the result of taking one side, which we call the opposite, and dividing it by another side, the hypotenuse, and 50 degrees being the angle that we've made. Well, this is the angle that we're working with in our triangle. Okay, that's step one. I'll talk about cos and tan in the next video.